Everything you've been taught about manifestation is backwards. Desire harder. Want it more. Feel the excitement of having it. But here's what nobody tells you: the quantum field doesn't respond to desire. It responds when desire disappears. Every time you want something, you're broadcasting a signal of absence. The field hears "I don't have this yet" and mirrors that exact state back to you with perfect precision. This is why you can visualize for months and still feel stuck in the same reality. You're not doing it wrong. You're just operating from the one state that guarantees delay. What if the breakthrough you've been chasing isn't waiting for you to want it more intensely? What if it's waiting for you to stop needing it at all? This isn't about giving up. It's about understanding why wanting keeps you locked in lack, and what actually happens when nothing feels missing anymore.
The quantum field does not respond to desire. It responds when desire disappears. That single sentence challenges almost everything people have been taught about manifestation. Because most methods are built entirely around wanting more, visualizing harder, feeling excited about something that isn't physically here yet. But wanting is not a neutral signal. Wanting is a declaration of absence. And the field doesn't organize itself around what you ask for. It organizes itself around what you are stabilized in. If you feel like something is missing, the system hears lack. If you feel like something needs to arrive for you to feel complete, the field registers incompleteness. And it keeps reflecting that state back, not as punishment, but as coherence. Reality mirrors the most consistent internal signal, not the most emotional one. This is why so many people say manifestation almost works for them. They feel brief highs, short bursts of hope, temporary alignment. But underneath those moments, there's still a subtle tension. A sense of waiting. And waiting is not neutral either. Waiting implies that fulfillment exists somewhere else, sometime later. The field responds accordingly. From a neurological perspective, this makes complete sense. Your brain is constantly predicting the future based on internal states. When the dominant state is wanting, the prediction loop reinforces seeking behavior. Dopamine spikes when you imagine the outcome, then drops when reality doesn't immediately match it. That cycle keeps the system in pursuit mode, not arrival mode. Spiritually, this is the difference between asking and embodying. Asking keeps you oriented toward what you don't have. Embodying stabilizes you in a state where nothing feels urgently required. And that state, the absence of internal lack, is what creates coherence. This doesn't mean desire is wrong. It means desire is a transitional signal, not a final one. Desire points towards something, but it cannot be the place you live from. If you try to manifest while emotionally stationed in "I need this to happen," you're broadcasting instability. The field can't organize cleanly around a signal that keeps oscillating between hope and absence. The most powerful shifts don't happen when people are trying. They happen when something inside settles, when the chase ends, when the internal negotiation stops. When you realize, often quietly, that even if nothing changes externally right now, nothing feels missing internally either. That moment is rare because it can feel unsettling. The ego interprets nothing as missing as giving up, as losing ambition, as settling. But it's the opposite. It's integration. It's the point where the identity stops leaning forward and starts standing still. And standing still is not stagnation in quantum terms. It's stabilization. When nothing feels missing, your nervous system relaxes. Your brain stops scanning for future completion. Emotional charge drops. Attention returns to the present moment. And the field finally receives a clean signal, not fragmented by longing, urgency, or conditional happiness. This is why manifestation often accelerates when people stop trying to manifest. Not because they detached from desire, but because they detached from lack. The identity stopped saying "I will be whole when this happens" and started operating from wholeness itself. That's when attraction stops feeling like effort. That's when outcomes begin to organize themselves without force. Not dramatically, not instantly, but inevitably. Most people never reach this state because they mistake wanting for alignment. They're taught to amplify desire instead of resolve it, to visualize instead of stabilize, to hope instead of inhabit. But the quantum field doesn't respond to hope, it responds to coherence. And coherence only appears when nothing inside you is arguing that something is missing. Once you understand that paradox, the entire process of manifestation changes, and the next question becomes obvious. If wanting pushes reality away, what actually happens inside you when nothing feels missing? That's where the shift truly begins. Wanting feels active. It feels productive. It feels like you're engaged in the process. But internally, wanting is a state of instability. It's your nervous system leaning forward, searching for resolution outside of itself. And the quantum field does not respond to motion without coherence. It responds to stability. When you want something, you're not just expressing preference, you're reinforcing an identity that hasn't arrived yet. The system says, I am not there. And because the field mirrors identity rather than intention, it organizes itself around that statement, not as resistance, as accuracy. From a neurological standpoint, wanting activates a loop of prediction and pursuit. Your brain releases dopamine in anticipation, not in fulfillment. That anticipation becomes addictive. You imagine the outcome, feel a surge of excitement, then return to baseline when reality doesn't immediately confirm it. Your mind interprets that drop as lack and tries again. Visualize more. Want harder, hope stronger. The loop tightens, but this loop never lands. It keeps the system in chase mode, and a system in chase mode cannot embody arrival. It's always oriented toward not yet. The field receives that orientation clearly. In the comments, drop one word that captures what you're ready to release. Maybe it's wanting, maybe it's lack, maybe it's urgency, maybe it's something uniquely yours. Let that word be a small but powerful declaration, a signal you send not just in this space but into the quantum field itself. Spiritually, this is why effort-based manifestation feels exhausting. You're constantly trying to generate the right feeling instead of letting the system settle naturally. The more you monitor yourself, am I aligned yet? Am I doing it right? The more you reinforce the idea that alignment is missing. Self-monitoring is still seeking. This is also why people experience brief synchronicities followed by silence. They touch coherence momentarily, then immediately lean back into wanting. The signal flickers instead of stabilizing. The field doesn't respond to flickers. It responds to consistency. Another overlooked aspect of wanting is its emotional charge. Wanting carries urgency even when it's subtle, and urgency signals threat to your nervous system. It implies that something important is missing now. When the system senses threat, it contracts, and contraction narrows perception. You stop noticing opportunities that don't match the exact form you're chasing. This is why people say, it was right in front of me, but I couldn't see it. They were too focused on the imagined outcome to register the real opening. Wanting creates tunnel vision. Coherence creates awareness. From a quantum perspective, observation collapses probability only when the observer is stable. An unstable observer produces noise. The field can't resolve cleanly around a signal that keeps changing. Desire that fluctuates between hope, fear, impatience, and doubt sends mixed information. Mixed information delays response. This doesn't mean you suppress desire. Suppression creates resistance, which is another form of instability. The shift happens when desire completes itself internally, when you stop negotiating with reality, when you stop asking when is it coming and start living as if your internal state doesn't depend on the answer. The moment you notice that nothing feels urgently missing, the wanting loop breaks. Your nervous system relaxes, your brain stops projecting fulfillment into the future. Attention returns to the present moment. And presence is not passive, it's precise. It registers what's actually available. That's when people say things unexpectedly work out. But it wasn't unexpected. They simply stopped filtering reality through lack. The field didn't change its behavior. The observer did. This is the hardest part for most people to accept. Manifestation doesn't reward effort. It rewards resolution. Not doing more, stabilizing more. Not imagining harder, needing less. When wanting dissolves, something else takes its place. A quiet sense of sufficiency, not pride, not arrogance, just enoughness. And that state sends a radically different signal into the field. Instead of "I need," the system says "I'm complete." Instead of "I'm waiting," it says "I'm here," and the field responds to that immediately. Not always with instant results, but with precise rearrangement. Because the moment nothing feels missing, attraction stops being a chase. It becomes a consequence. There is a moment in this process that most people never recognize, because it doesn't feel extraordinary. There's no surge of emotion, no excitement, no sense of achievement. Instead, something far more subtle happens. The internal tension drops, not because you received what you wanted, but because you stopped organizing your identity around the absence of it. This is the moment nothing feels missing. It doesn't mean you've lost desire. It means desire has completed itself internally. Your nervous system is no longer leaning forward. Your mind stops scanning the future for validation. And for the first time, your sense of self is no longer conditional on an outcome arriving. This state is often misunderstood because it feels neutral. And neutrality doesn't impress the ego. We're taught that manifestation should feel powerful, emotional, energizing. But emotional intensity is not coherence. Emotional intensity is movement, and movement without stability creates noise. When nothing feels missing, the system stabilizes. Your brain exits prediction mode. Instead of constantly asking what's next, it begins responding to what is. That shift alone changes perception dramatically. You notice opportunities that were invisible before, not because they appeared suddenly, but because your attention is no longer distorted by lack. From a scientific perspective, this is a reduction in cognitive load, fewer internal conflicts, fewer competing narratives. Your brain conserves energy when it's not trying to resolve an imagined future problem. That energy becomes available for awareness, and awareness is what allows alignment to translate into action naturally. Spiritually, this state has always been described as sufficiency, not abundance as accumulation, but abundance as wholeness. You're not telling the universe, "I have everything." You're simply no longer telling it, "I'm incomplete." This distinction matters. The field doesn't respond to affirmations. It responds to baseline states. And baseline states are what remain when you stop trying to influence them. If this resonates with you, hit subscribe and click the bell icon next to it. Also, join our Manifestation Club on gogetter.au. This isn't just a channel, this is a frequency. If you felt something shift while watching, you're already tuned in. We're not just consuming content here, we're practicing new ways of being. Let's keep growing together. Many people reach this moment accidentally, after they've given up trying, after they've stopped hoping, after they've redirected attention back into life itself. And then, almost inconveniently, things begin to align, not dramatically, quietly. Conversations open, timing improves, decisions feel obvious. This is why people say manifestation works best when you least expect it. But that phrase misses the point. It's not about expectation, it's about internal resolution. Expectation still implies future fulfillment. Resolution lives in the present. When nothing feels missing, you stop negotiating with reality. You don't need signs, you don't need reassurance, you don't need to monitor your vibration or correct your thoughts. The internal environment is already coherent. There's nothing left to fix. This can feel uncomfortable at first. The ego interprets this state as passivity, as doing nothing. But nothing could be further from the truth. This is the most potent internal position you can occupy. Because from here, action is no longer reactive, it's responsive. You don't move to escape lack. You move because movement makes sense. You don't accept opportunities out of fear. You accept them because they fit. There's no internal debate because there's no internal gap to fill. What's happening here is identity stabilization. You're no longer a person trying to become whole. You're operating as someone who already is. And that identity emits a radically different signal into the field. This is the moment attraction stops being effort-based. You're no longer manifesting, you're allowing, not passively, but precisely. The system is open, alert, and non-resistant. Most people don't stay here long. The mind tries to reintroduce wanting. It checks in. Is this working? That question alone reactivates lack. That's why this phase requires awareness, not discipline. Awareness without attachment. In the comments, share one small commitment you're making today to anchor this state. It could be as simple as breathe, or trust, or notice. Your word matters. Your commitment matters. Because you matter. If you can remain in this state, not forcing it, not narrating it, reality begins responding with surprising speed. Not because you asked louder, but because you finally stopped saying something else underneath. The quantum field doesn't need desire to act. It needs clarity, and clarity only appears when nothing inside you is insisting that something is missing. Once you understand this state, the rest of the process becomes obvious. Detachment stops feeling like loss. Silence stops feeling empty. And alignment stops feeling like work. And that leads directly to the next realization: why detachment isn't about letting go, but about stabilizing identity. That's where everything accelerates. Most people misunderstand detachment because they confuse it with loss. They assume that when something no longer feels urgent, it means they're giving up on it. But in quantum terms, detachment has nothing to do with abandoning desire. It has everything to do with stabilizing identity. When you detach, you're not saying, "I don't want this anymore." You're saying, "My sense of self no longer depends on this arriving." And that distinction changes everything. The field doesn't respond to desire being present or absent. It responds to whether your identity is fluctuating or stable. Detachment is what happens when the internal argument ends. When you're no longer negotiating with reality. When you stop checking whether you're aligned, whether it's working, whether you're doing it right. That checking is still a form of attachment. It keeps the system oscillating between hope and doubt. From a neurological standpoint, detachment reduces prediction error. Your brain no longer treats the future outcome as necessary for emotional regulation. That frees attention. Energy stops being spent on monitoring and redirects naturally into perception. You become more present, not because you're trying to be, but because there's nothing pulling you out of the moment. Spiritually, detachment has always been misunderstood as renunciation, but true detachment isn't withdrawal, it's embodiment. You're no longer reaching for something to complete you because completion has already been internalized. The identity stops leaning forward, it stands still, and stillness is not inactivity, it's coherence. This is why detachment often feels calm rather than dramatic. There's no internal announcement, no ritual letting go. You simply notice that certain thoughts no longer loop, certain outcomes no longer carry emotional weight. You still move through life, but without the undercurrent of urgency. And here's the paradox. This is the exact moment when attraction accelerates, not because you stopped caring, but because the signal you're emitting stopped changing. The field finally has something consistent to respond to. Many people sabotage this phase by reintroducing effort. They tell themselves they should be visualizing more, affirming more, feeling more. But effort pulls you back into identity fluctuation. It says, "I need to do something for this to happen." And the field hears instability again. Detachment doesn't mean you stop acting. It means action emerges from clarity instead of lack. You say yes when it fits, you say no when it doesn't. There's no overthinking because there's no internal gap to fill. Action becomes clean. This is also where comparison loses power. When identity is stable, other people's timelines stop triggering urgency. You don't rush to catch up. You don't delay to feel safe. You move when movement feels correct, not when fear or desire demands it. If you're experiencing this detachment, it's not something to fix. It's something to protect. The quiet neutrality you're feeling is not emptiness. It's alignment settling into place. If this resonates, type in the comments "nothing is missing," not as an affirmation, as a recognition of where you already are. Because once identity stabilizes, reality doesn't need persuasion. It reorganizes on its own. And when that happens, the response doesn't feel forced, it feels effortless. That's when people say manifestation suddenly worked, even though the real work was finished long before. Which leads to the next phase. The moment reality starts responding without effort, without chasing, without noise, that's where the shift becomes visible. When the internal state stabilizes, reality doesn't respond with fireworks. It responds with precision. Things begin to move, but not in overwhelming ways. The right conversation happens at the right moment. A decision presents itself without pressure. An opportunity appears that doesn't require convincing, chasing, or overthinking. And what's most surprising is not what happens, it's how little effort it takes. This is where many people misinterpret what's unfolding. They expect manifestation to feel like winning, like finally arriving. But when the field responds to coherence, the response feels normal, natural, almost obvious. There's no internal resistance because there's no internal demand. You're not trying to extract something from reality. You're simply responding to what aligns. From a scientific perspective, this is what happens when perception and prediction synchronize. Your brain stops scanning for confirmation and starts recognizing patterns. You notice openings instead of obstacles. Timing improves, not because time changed, but because your internal readiness did. You're no longer forcing outcomes to fit an identity. The identity already fits what's arriving. Spiritually, this phase feels quiet because it lacks drama. There's no emotional surge announcing that this is it. Instead, there's a subtle sense of inevitability. Things feel like they were always going to happen this way. And that's because, once coherence stabilizes, outcomes stop feeling external. They feel like continuations. Another clear sign of this phase is reduced effort without reduced movement. You do less, but more happens, not because you disengaged, but because friction dissolved. You're no longer pushing against the field or pulling from it. You're moving with it. This is also where people notice that what arrives isn't always what they imagined, but it fits better. The form may differ, but the function aligns. And because you're no longer attached to a specific outcome, you recognize value immediately instead of comparing it to expectation. Importantly, this phase doesn't require you to stay passive. It requires discernment. You still choose, you still act, but action now comes from clarity, not urgency, from resonance, not fear. You say yes when something fits without justification. You say no without guilt when it doesn't. This is the stage where many people accidentally sabotage progress by reintroducing old patterns. They start narrating, explaining, questioning whether it's really happening. That questioning pulls attention back into lack. But if you stay present, the momentum continues building quietly. Reality doesn't test you here, it mirrors you. The more stable your internal state, the more consistent the external response becomes. Not instantly, but reliably. One aligned moment leads to another. Not because you're manifesting harder, but because nothing inside you is interfering anymore. This is what people mean when they say things suddenly flow. But flow isn't magic. It's the absence of resistance. And resistance ends the moment identity stops negotiating with reality. This is also why many people don't talk about this phase. There's nothing to prove, nothing to announce. The shift feels personal, integrated, lived rather than explained. And this is exactly where grounding becomes important. Not to create results, but to stabilize them. To remain anchored in the state that allowed the response to happen in the first place. Because once reality begins responding, the work is no longer about attracting, it's about sustaining coherence. And that's where the final piece comes in. When reality begins responding, the most important work is no longer attraction, it's stabilization. The internal state that allowed the field to respond doesn't need to be intensified. It needs to be maintained. And maintenance in this context doesn't mean effort, it means familiarity. The moment something external confirms alignment, the mind often wants to rush ahead, to label it, to secure it, to understand where it's going. But that impulse comes from the old identity, the one that needed certainty to feel safe. The new identity doesn't require that. It's grounded in sufficiency. It doesn't lean forward or pull back. It stays. This is where many people unintentionally disrupt the process. They reintroduce urgency. They begin monitoring results. They start asking whether they're doing enough to keep it. But coherence doesn't collapse from lack of action. It collapses from inconsistency, from shifting back into need. Staying aligned at this stage means continuing to live from the state where nothing feels missing, not performing wholeness, not affirming it, not proving it, simply inhabiting it, letting it be ordinary, letting it become your default reference point. From a neurological perspective, this is consolidation. New patterns only stabilize when they're repeated without contradiction. Every time you respond to life from calm sufficiency instead of urgency, the identity deepens. Your nervous system learns that this state is safe, sustainable, real. Spiritually, this is embodiment. The shift is no longer something that happened, it's something you live from. You're not manifesting outcomes anymore, you're expressing coherence. And outcomes follow naturally because the signal remains clean. This is also why structure can be helpful here. Not structure to force results, but structure to anchor awareness, writing, reflection, intentional focus. Simple practices that keep you connected to your internal state without stimulating the old chase. Not rituals to make something happen, but containers that prevent interference. That's the role of quantum rebirth. It wasn't created as a manifestation technique. It was created for this exact phase. When desire has quieted, identity is shifting. And the external world is beginning to respond. It offers language and structure to understand what's happening internally, so you don't accidentally revert to old patterns just because they feel familiar. Alongside it, the quantum grimoire exists as a grounding companion, a way to anchor coherence through conscious writing and symbolic intention. Not to ask the field for more, but to remain stable while what's already unfolding continues to organize. You'll find both in the pinned comment for whenever you feel ready to deepen and stabilize what you're already living. Nothing here needs to be forced. Nothing needs to be chased. When nothing feels missing, attraction becomes automatic. And the quantum field doesn't need persuasion. It needs consistency. If this video resonated, it's because you've already touched that state, even briefly. And once you felt it, you know it's real. The work now isn't to find it again, it's to stay. Make sure you share this video with your loved ones. You might just be the blessing in disguise they need today. Remember, you're not just sharing, you're spreading sufficiency and wholeness. And that energy will dissolve every barrier between you and what's already yours.